Welcome to Dark Minds, Shattered Lives, where we expose predators, dive into the minds of evildoers, and help you and your loved ones avoid them. I'm your host, Deborah Dobbs. I'm an author and victim advocate with a reputation for rattling cages. As promised, I am going to cover the 20 traits on the Hare Psychopathy Checklist-Revised, or PCLR. It's developed by Dr. Robert Hare. You've probably heard me talk about him a lot over the last, I don't know, this I think was only like my 12th episode. I have no idea how many times I've mentioned Dr. Hare. If it has anything to do with psychopathy, I'm going to be mentioning Dr. Hare. So this, I'm just going to call it the checklist for this episode, just for the sake of the word salad, what feels like a word salad, and me stumbling over all the words in the Hare Psychopathy Checklist-Revised. So we're going to call it the checklist. It is kind of the gold standard for assessing psychopathy. Now, it's not meant to be used alone. I mentioned this in the last episode. It's a tool combined with other things like observations, looking at the client's or the patient's history or the subject's history. Often this is done in prison settings or mental health, like a mental hospital. Rarely does someone just walk in and say, I think I'm a psychopath. Can you do this test on me? I want to get help. Usually people don't think there's anything wrong with them. People with different personality disorders, actually. And I believe that psychopathy still falls in the personality disorder realm. Again, I'm not a licensed professional counselor. Do this disclaimer first before we go any deeper. I'm not a licensed mental health professional. I'm not a doctor. My expertise is limited, and it comes through my education. I have a bachelor's and a master's in sociology, and my master's focused mostly on criminology and deviant behavior. And I've been working in the mental health field and the fields of mental health victim advocacy for 30 years. So there you have it. There's a disclaimer. So with the checklist, there's 20 traits. It's a difficult thing to do. Not anybody can just administer this assessment to someone. Each trait is ranked from 0 to 2. So the maximum score is 40. And anything typically 30 or above indicates psychopathy. The traits, however, a lot of people, as we go through these traits, a lot of people are going to display a degree of the traits on the list. And it doesn't mean someone's a psychopath. A lot of people in general may display a little bit of these traits, like maybe a 1 in the 0 to 2 range. And then some people will not display them at all. But you're also going to think, wow, a lot of teenagers. My teenager, he seems to display all these traits. My daughter's acting like maybe she's a psychopath. A lot of teens are going to display traits of different personality disorders. So if some of these sound familiar because you have some teenage angst in your house, don't go jumping to conclusions. It's kind of normal. And if you are a teen listening to this, it gets better. Your brain can change. Your brain is still cooking. It's not done yet. I have a lot of respect for the people that put this assessment together, who worked with Dr. Hare to make this happen, because imagine how difficult it is to try to survey someone or assess someone, come to some conclusions about a person when a person lies through his teeth or her teeth. As I mentioned in the previous episode, this is one of the reasons why this assessment is administered in conjunction with other techniques, because a standalone assessment, you sit down and you try to do a survey with someone who truly is a psychopath. I don't know how far you're going to get with that, given the lack of honesty. If you're interested in learning about the history of this, the creation of this, and all the work that went into putting together the checklist and testing it. It's a fascinating story. And you can read, it's a book by Dr. Hare, Robert Hare, called Without Conscience. And I'll put a link in the description so you can get it. It's really interesting. Okay, so let's dive in. Some of these traits I'll go into a little more detail than the others. Some of them are just obvious. But the first one is charm, glibness and superficial charm. Psychopaths can come across as like smooth talking, charismatic, but it's going to be on the surface. They might be engaging, but you'll, after a while, they might make a good first impression, but the charm is surface level. It's meant to manipulate, not to connect. And one of the things that I really liked in Gavin de Becker's book, The Gift of Fear, is that he's got a website with a lot of training and stuff. He will say, charm is a verb. Instead of thinking of someone as charming, you think of, why is this person trying to charm me? They want something. It's leveraging it into something. And the other thing that I want to emphasize is that some psychopaths aren't charming. Ted Bundy, for instance, that's one of the most famous psychopaths people think of. He was said to be awkward and kind of weird. And the man used trickery, faking an injury, for instance, to access his victim. It's not like my understanding was that he wasn't necessarily smooth talking. So not every psychopath is going to be charming. They also can learn how to do this. So they can mimic behaviors. All right. No matter what, though, it's on the surface. It's superficial. Pay attention. Charm is a verb. It's a tactic. The second trait is a grandiose sense of self-worth. Individuals with this trait exhibit like an inflated ego, believing they're superior to others, and they might exaggerate their achievements or expect special treatment because of who they are. I mean, they have a narcissistic streak on display. Psychopaths tend to be narcissistic. Back to Bundy. I'm not going to focus on him too much because it's kind of history, and he's not the only psychopath to walk among us and to make headlines. But he did something. He defended himself. And he was a law student, a far cry from being a full-fledged lawyer. So he thought that he could provide the best defense for him, having attended law school for a little bit. He also, keep this in mind as I go through the other traits, because I won't be bringing Ted Bundy up a whole lot. If you defend yourself, as he did, now he is questioning, like either on direct or on cross-examination, loved ones maybe of victims, survivors, law enforcement. And I'm sure that he was pleased with that, being able to do that. The third trait is a need for stimulation or proneness to boredom. Psychopaths crave constant excitement. They seek thrills. They may engage in risky behavior, extreme sports, for example, because they'll have these, they need to do these type of things to alleviate feelings of restlessness. Now, again, there's a lot of people that are easily bored. It doesn't mean they're a psychopath. Psychopaths, however, tend to be prone to boredom. It also doesn't always manifest in criminal acts. It may be someone that just goes from one job to another, or to alleviate feelings of boredom at the job, they create drama and conflict because it just makes the job more amusing, more entertaining. And, or they might just get into extreme sports, or even in regular sports, they might get really reckless, do some crazy stuff. With psychopaths who are criminal, this trait can lead to some really sinister, nefarious, violent acts. And there's one that kept coming up when I was, kind of searching for, kind of modern day psychopaths. There was one that kept coming up, and I don't know if she's actually a psychopath, but she did display the traits. And her name is Lucy Letby, and she's currently serving multiple life sentences. It was in the UK. She was a nurse, and she's in prison for, I think if I say the word, it can disrupt my episodes or viewership or something. And that's why people say unalived. So Lucy Letby unalived like 7 babies and attempted to do so to 7 others while working as a neonatal nurse at a hospital in the UK. This happened in 2015 and 2016. And so now this part is kind of speculative. As far as the thrill seeking, this came up as an example. Actually, I was just kind of like doing AI and give me examples of this. And so I'm going to read it to you because it really bothered me. I don't want to try to paraphrase it myself. I just threw this into Grok. It said, while direct evidence of thrill seeking isn't explicitly detailed in court records, the pattern of her actions suggests a need for stimulation beyond the routine of her nursing role. She worked in a high-pressure neonatal unit, but the repetitive nature of monitoring and caring for infants may have felt monotonous to someone with psychopathic traits. Her deliberate acts, not going to go into the acts that she did, could reflect a pursuit of intense emotional or psychological stimulation derived from the power and control of life and death situations. These acts were not impulsive in the moment, but planned, indicating she might have sought the thrill of orchestrating crises and observing the chaos, such as during resuscitation attempts she sometimes initiated herself. Court evidence showed that Letby was often present during sudden infant collapses, and she reportedly displayed an unusual eagerness to be involved, and even when she wasn't assigned to the babies. And so her behavior also afterwards, she would go, years later, go online, look for the victims' families on social media, and it suggested a lingering fascination with the impact of her actions, potentially feeding her need for excitement through reliving the events. This kind of falls in line with a psychopathic trait because her crimes provided this perverse form of stimulation beyond what her professional role offered. And it just showed a complete disregard for the devastating consequences. So here's the thing about Lucy Letby. There are people that think she's innocent, and they are trying to, I don't know the UK law is like as much as the US, but I believe she's had a couple of appeals, and it didn't overturn any convictions, but there's still a push to take another look at this. And there are some nurses that say she's not guilty. So I do need to say that, but she was convicted and, like I said, multiple life sentences for what the court believed there was enough evidence to prove that she did. All right. The 4th trait is pathological lying. Lying and deceit just comes very effortlessly, naturally to a psychopath. And they'll tend to maybe weave elaborate stories to manipulate others with little regard for getting caught. And I actually experienced this once. So I've worked, like I said, almost 30 years in mental health. And I can't say that the industry does not have its fair share of mentally unstable people. I think there's some people that seek the profession, they study psychology and counseling to work on themselves, which is great. But sometimes they're not really healed. They haven't processed enough. I don't know. And they get into the profession when maybe they're really not ready. This person, I don't know if there's any healing to do because she displayed a lot of traits on this list. And I'm just going to focus on the lying. So she would lie constantly. And I started, first it's like, is she just forgetting? Is she saying, did I get it wrong? And what I remember that, happening an hour ago or yesterday, it just didn't happen that way. And so, I kind of like try to give her the benefit of the doubt, but it was just consistent. She would go out and give a presentation and tell me that she had done this, this, this. And then the people that were actually there said, no, that is not at all what she said. And one day she was on the phone, and this had been going on for a while. She's on the phone. She's got her door wide open in her office. My door's open. Our offices are right next to each other. And she's talking loudly to a colleague. And she was talking to him about, standards and how turning in your paperwork, getting your case notes done and that sort of thing. And when she got off the phone with him, again, door's wide open. This isn't a confidential conversation. And she comes out and she just starts telling me what she told this guy. And in detail, I said this, and then I said this, and I'm thinking, that is not what you said at all. Not even close. And I confronted her on it. I said, there's a pattern of dishonesty here. And I heard you. You have to know that. Your door's open, my door's open. I heard every word you said. You did not say these things. And she didn't say, oh, I meant to say this. Oh, this is what I intended. There was no explanation. She was just kind of like, oh, well. And then she went in her office, and it did not matter to her. There was no saving face, nothing. And so she had absolutely no regard. It didn't bother her at all to get caught. And that was something that stood out, because people tell white lies, teens lie, kids lie. A lot of people, if you were totally honest all the time, you probably wouldn't have any friends if you were really honest. And so, whatever. People will do little things, whatever. She was just flat out lying all the time. And it's unnerving, because she was in a profession and where they're, in the therapeutic environment, the professional, there's this power differential. The therapist has a lot of power in that dynamic, in that relationship. And a client is coming in sometimes at the worst time of their lives, and they're really vulnerable. And so that was very unnerving. Another trait is conning and manipulativeness. This trait, it highlights a calculating ability to exploit others for personal gain. Psychopaths are adept at reading people and using deception to get what they want. It may be money, it might be power, it may be control, it might be not being bored. But whatever it is, they're pretty good at that. 6 is lack of remorse or guilt. This is kind of a hallmark of psychopathy. They do not experience remorse. They don't feel it. They can hurt other people. They might do that intentionally or unintentionally, emotionally, physically, financially, and not feel an ounce of guilt, not lose any sleep over it. Shallow affect is number 7. That one, some people are not really sure about. It's kind of a weird way of saying, it's not weird. It's just a term to describe limited range of emotions or very fleeting or superficial emotions. And again, psychopaths can mimic things. They might mimic feelings. They may study someone's expression and mimic it to blend in, but they just don't have the depth of genuine emotional experience. And they can, in spite of efforts, come off as cold or detached. You'll feel it when you're around someone. You can just kind of pick up on it. 8 is callousness and lack of empathy. Very similar to lack of remorse or guilt. Empathy in psychopaths is just non-existent. It's absent. They will struggle to understand or care about other people's feelings. And people are like objects to them. I had a friend that said, a psychopath, if you're in the way, a psychopath might walk around you, or they might, be just as inclined to hurt you. Make sure you're never in anyone's way ever again without a second thought. 9 is parasitic lifestyle. Parasitic lifestyle is something that, yes, another thing you'll say, yeah, teens do this. My kid does this. It's not the same thing. Yeah, a teen can work and be very independent, but there's a limit. And the parasitic lifestyle is not just depending on a parent. It's exploitation It's just exploitation of money, housing, with contributing nothing in return. Psychopaths will just live off other people's efforts while offering, there's like no reciprocity. It may be someone that, I actually know someone that lives like this. And unfortunately, a dear friend of mine was married to him, and she emancipated herself after over a decade. And this person just never worked, didn't want to get a job. He had gotten laid off, no surprise, very shallow kind of person, very image conscious. And he just wasn't going to take the first thing that came his way. So you're like talking a decade of being, it's that inflated sense of self. I was too good to just take any old job that comes my way. But also just, well, it was a lot easier to pursue whatever hobby, dream he claimed to have and try different businesses on his wife's dime and not contribute a thing to the household, to the mortgage. But then, of course, want mine when it's over with. That's an example of a parasitic lifestyle. 10 is poor behavioral controls. Psychopaths have a short fuse. They tend to be impulsive, react impulsively, especially to frustration or perceived slights. Just they think someone's insulted them and they'll just pop off. It can lead to like sudden outbursts and aggressive behavior, verbal attacks, or physical. Trait number 11 is promiscuous sexual behavior. Okay, you can probably figure that out. There's no real relationships there. It's power, it's control, or it's, a temporary cure for boredom. There's no meaningful relationship there. 12 is early behavioral problems. This is before age 12. Rule breaking, aggression. Many psychopaths will display these traits when they're very young. I've watched documentaries with moms saying they knew something was wrong with the kid when the child was like a toddler. 13, lack of realistic long-term goals. Psychopaths may have grandiose dreams and think really big, but they have no practical plans to achieve those dreams. Goals are often very unrealistic or just completely abandoned when the immediate gratification is no longer in sight, no longer existing. Again, it's not fun anymore. I'm bored. I'm going to go seek another type of thrill. 14 is impulsivity. Psychopaths will act on a whim. They don't really consider consequences. They'll make snap decisions. From quitting jobs to engaging in that risky behavior without any forethought. 15 is irresponsibility. I think you know what that means. But this is big. Okay, it's not being forgetful. It's not forgetting to turn on the alarm clock or hitting the snooze button, if that exists anymore, too many times. Psychopaths will just fail to honor commitments. They won't pay bills. They won't show up for appointments. They will not follow through with the responsibilities that they have. Any obligations, that's the kind of thing. 16, failure to accept responsibility for actions. You'll see this often with domestic violence. Not that all abusers are psychopaths, but it'll be like, if you didn't make me so mad, I wouldn't hit you. Psychopaths are not going to take accountability for their behavior. You just tend to see this also in domestic violence situations. They will deflect blame, make excuses, rationalize their actions, minimize the impact. I read about a psychopath in I think the Psychopath Whisperer and other books, where it was like, well, I needed a car, and I was going to just steal this car. And if she hadn't been there, I wouldn't have killed her. It's her fault. She just should have gone into work. She shouldn't have been sitting in her car on her phone. She'd be alive today. It's her fault. That kind of thing. 17 is many short-term marital relationships. Okay. They don't tend to have long relationships, romantic relationships. They don't have romantic partners that last. Connections are very superficial. Relationships are to be manipulative. People are objects. 18 is juvenile delinquency. A history of criminal or antisocial behavior, like vandalism, theft, or violence. And that's where you're like crossing the line, you're breaking the law. 19 is revocation of conditional release. That's parole, probation. Psychopaths are not good candidates for early release, but they're often very good at convincing a parole board. They're better than their non-psychopathic counterparts at convincing a parole board that they are really, they're good. They're a good risk. And you can count on them to reoffend, to revert back to the problems that got them there in the first place. So giving them leniency doesn't work. That's one of the reasons why I'm like, wish more judges were educated about psychopathy. I'll have a story to tell you another time about this. Trait 20, trying to stay on track here. Last trait, criminal versatility. This trait refers to a pattern of diverse criminal activities. Fraud, might be fraud to violence. Psychopaths will engage in a wide range of illegal acts driven by opportunity or impulse. The first one that comes to mind is like Billy Schmurmer. I did an episode or two on him. He wanted to steal from elderly people, and he would also unalive them because they were inconvenient. They could testify against him. They would report him. They were in the way. And he had absolutely no remorse for killing these people. Like I said, just a reminder, psychopaths tend to display those traits. Not everyone who displays one of those traits, or even 4 or 5 of those traits, is a psychopath. Thank you for listening to Dark Minds, Shattered Lives. I'm Deborah Dobbs, and until next time, trust your gut and know your exits.